December 26, 1931, Battle Creek, Michigan, 3 o'clock in the morning. In the sterile silence of room 219 at Dr. Kellogg's sanatorium, only one sound is heard. It is the scratching of a fountain pen on paper. The man sitting at the table is trembling. He is 56 years old, but he looks 80. His skin burns like fire. The medical diagnosis on the chart at the nurse's station is dry and specific. Severe form of shingles, complicated by acute nervous exhaustion. But the patient knows that this is not just an illness. This is retribution. James Cash Penney, the man whose name is written in golden letters on the signs of 1,400 stores across all the United States of America, is finishing his last letter. This is not a business directive. This is not a merger strategy. This is a farewell. He carefully writes words addressed to his wife Caroline and 2 sons. In his mind, clouded by sedative medications, there is only one clear thought. He will not live until dawn. Outside the window, the winter wind howls, sweeping snow over the grounds of the elite medical institution, where America's wealthiest people try to buy health. But Penney is not here as a rich man. He is here as a bankrupt. Just 24 months ago, his personal fortune was estimated at $40 million. In today's money, that's more than $700 million. He was a titan. He was a symbol of the American dream. A man who built an empire on one simple principle: trust. Today, in this cold room, his bank account is empty. Moreover, he owes the banks $7 million in cash. The payment deadline expires in a few days. He has nothing to pay with. Penney sets down the pen. The pain in his torso becomes unbearable. Shingles is a viral infection of the nerve endings, which doctors describe as the sensation of molten lead being poured under the skin. But physical pain is nothing compared to what is happening in his head. Psychiatrists of that time would call it profound melancholy. Today, we call it clinical depression with suicidal syndrome. He is convinced that he committed a crime against his family. He has convinced himself that his death is the only way to save the remnants of his reputation. If he dies tonight, insurance payouts might cover part of the debts. He no longer thinks like a living person, but like an asset to be liquidated. This is not just a story about losing money. The Great Depression destroyed thousands of fortunes. Brokers were jumping out of windows on Wall Street. Bankers were putting bullets in their temples in their offices. But James Cash Penney's case is unique. He was not a speculator. He was not a gambler. He was a moralist. All his life he built business on strict Christian principles, naming his first stores the Golden Rule. He believed that if you do the right thing, God will reward you with success. And now, sitting in the darkness of the Battle Creek sanatorium, he stares into the abyss. His faith collapsed before his stocks did. The system failed. The Golden Rule did not work. He gave everything he had to people, and in response, reality crushed him. He lies down in bed, trying not to touch the inflamed skin to the sheets. He closes his eyes, waiting for his heart to stop. He wants this stop. This is the night when the king of retail died. What will happen in the morning will technically concern the same biological organism, but the person who wakes up, if he wakes up, will be someone completely different. But to understand how the owner of a giant empire ended up in a solitary ward awaiting death, you need to rewind the tape back. You need to go back to where it all began. Not to the boardrooms of New York, but to the muddy fields of Missouri, where an 8-year-old boy first learned the price of $1. The story of the fall does not begin with the stock market crash. It begins with upbringing. To understand the nature of the catastrophe in Battle Creek, you need to go back half a century to a completely different world. We travel to 1883, Missouri, the town of Hamilton. The backwoods where life is measured by corn harvests and Sunday sermons. Here, on the farm, an 8-year-old boy named Jimmy receives a lesson that forever deforms his psyche. His father, James Cash Penney Sr., sits him down at the kitchen table. The father is an old-school Baptist preacher, a man who does not take money for serving God, but demands iron discipline on earth. He looks his son in the eyes and says a phrase that sounds like a sentence. From this moment on, you are responsible for your own clothing and shoes. This is not a pedagogical experiment. This is the end of childhood. At 8 years old, Jimmy Penney stops being a child and becomes a small economic unit. He begins growing watermelons and raising pigs so as not to go barefoot. He learns to count every cent not out of greed, but out of fear of the humiliation of poverty. It is here, in the mud of the Missouri farm, that his main fear is formed: dependence on others. By the age of 20, this fear turns him into a workaholic. But fate delivers the first blow. Doctors diagnose him with a condition that at the end of the 19th century sounded like a deferred death sentence: predisposition to tuberculosis. The doctor's verdict is categorical. The Missouri climate will kill him. He needs dry air. He needs to go west. Penney heads to Colorado. He is young, ambitious, and armed with his father's morality, which is his main capital and, as it turns out later, his main obstacle. His first attempt to build a business ends in a disaster that perfectly illustrates his character. In the town of Longmont, Colorado, he invests all his savings, $300, into a meat market. The business goes well until it encounters the reality of the time. The main customer of the shop is the local hotel. The hotel cook, the man on whom orders depend, sets a condition. Penney must send him a bottle of bourbon weekly for free. This is standard practice, lubrication for business in the Wild West. For any other merchant, this would be just marketing expenses. For James Cash Penney, this is a moral crime. He refuses to give a bribe with alcohol. The cook terminates the contract. The shop goes bankrupt. Penney loses everything. He ends up on the street with empty pockets but a clear conscience. This is a key moment. He is ready to destroy his own well-being for the sake of principle. This pattern of behavior, principle above profit, will elevate him to the top, but it will also cause his downfall in 1931. Broken but not defeated, in 1902 he finds himself in a place that can only be described as hell on earth. Kemmerer, Wyoming, a mining town where coal dust clogs the lungs and law is enforced in 20 saloons operating around the clock. Population, 1,000 people, mostly miners living from paycheck to paycheck. Here, company stores rule, retail outlets owned by mine owners. They sell goods on credit at predatory interest rates, effectively turning workers into serfs. Miners always owe the store more than they earn. This is a system of slavery disguised as trade. It is here that Penney meets his mentors, Guy Johnson and Thomas Callahan. They offer him a crazy deal: to open a branch of their Golden Rule store. The terms are harsh. He must invest $2,000, which he doesn't have. Penney borrows $1,500 at huge interest, adds his last $500, and enters the game. On April 14, 1902, At dawn, James Cash Penney opens the doors of his first store in Kemmerer. It is a wooden shack 25 by 40 feet in size, but what he offers inside is a revolution. His business model is economic suicide by the standards of the time. Point 1. No credit, cash only. Point 2. No delivery, pick up your goods yourself. Point 3. Fixed price, no haggling. In a town where the entire economy is built on debt notes, he demands live money. Local merchants laugh at him. They predict closure in a month. Who will go to a store where you have to pay immediately? But Penney sees what others do not see. He sees the miners' wives. Women who are tired of the endless bondage of company stores. He offers them a fair deal. Low price today instead of a debt pit tomorrow. He sells quality overalls, fabrics, and shoes with minimal markup. He calls the store Golden Rule, referencing the biblical principle, and as you would have people do to you, do also to them likewise. This is not marketing. This is his religion. He works like a man possessed. The store opens at 7 in the morning and closes when it gets dark outside. Penney lives in the attic above the sales floor. There is no furniture. He and his wife, Berta, first love, whom he will soon lose, sleep on a mattress on the floor. Their table is shoeboxes. Their chairs are nail crates. When their first child is born, its cradle becomes a clothing box. He economizes on everything except product quality. He does not hire cleaners. He mops the floors himself before opening. He does not hire loaders. He hauls bales of fabric himself. Customers see this. They see a man who works harder than they do themselves, and they begin to trust him. On the first day of operation, when the sun sets behind the Black Mountains of Wyoming, Penney counts the revenue. $466.59. An incredible sum. By the end of the year, turnover amounts to nearly $29,000. Skeptics are confounded. Golden Rule has defeated the credit needle. But behind this success lurks a dark side. Penney is not just building a business, he is building a fortress around his soul. He becomes convinced that success is proof of divine grace. He starts to believe that his method is infallible. He creates a partnership system where every store manager gets a share of the profits and the right to open a new store, becoming a partner for the next manager. This is a viral growth scheme that will cover America with his store network in 20 years. He creates an army of clones, young, ambitious people ready to work 18 hours a day, not drink, not smoke, and live by the Golden Rule. He calls them partners, not employees. By 1912, he already has 34 stores. He abandons the Golden Rule name and gives the chain his own name, J.C. Penney Company. It seems like a story of triumph. The boy who bought clothes with money from selling watermelons now clothes the nation. But the foundation of this greatness has a crack. Penney built an empire on control. He controls every price, every manager, every delivery. He doesn't know how to delegate. He only knows how to multiply himself. And as long as the economy is growing, this system works perfectly. But Penney, blinded by his righteousness and success, does not notice how the world around him is changing. He does not notice that the era of romantic capitalism is ending, and the era of cynical finance is beginning. He is convinced that God is his main shareholder, and this conviction, which brought him to the top, will become the very trap that snaps shut in 1929. He begins to feel invincible. He starts thinking that he can save not only customers, but everyone around him. And this pride, disguised as charity, leads him to the fateful decision in Florida. 1913, Salt Lake City. James Cash Penney stands at the window of his office, looking at the mountains that once seemed an insurmountable barrier to him. Now they look small. His chain has 34 stores. Turnover has exceeded $2 million. For the son of a Baptist preacher, this is an astronomical sum. But it is at this moment that a man enters the story who will turn the charismatic merchant into a corporate monster. Earl Camsell Sams. If Penney was the heart of the company, Sams became its cold, calculating brain. He was the complete opposite of the founder. Penney was intuitive, emotional, and obsessed with morality. Sams was systematic, tough, and obsessed with efficiency. It is Sams who utters the phrase that changes the trajectory of their fates. "Jim, you can't shake hands with every partner. If we want to grow, we need to stop being a family and become an army." This was the first strategic marriage of two worlds, provincial idealism and corporate pragmatism. Penney agrees. In 1914, they make a decision that shocks their circle. They move the headquarters from cozy Salt Lake City to the beast's lair, New York. Imagine this contrast. People accustomed to the smell of manure and coal dust enter the Woolworth Building, a neo-Gothic skyscraper on Manhattan, which was then called the Cathedral of Commerce. They rent an office on a high floor. Now under their feet is not the mud of Missouri, but polished marble and millions of people rushing after the American dream. This merging of worlds was painful but necessary. Penney learns to wear expensive suits, learns to speak the language of bankers, learns to play by Wall Street rules, although in his soul he despises their cynicism. Sams builds the structure. He introduces standardization. Now every store from California to Maine looks the same, smells the same, and operates the same. This is the birth of modern franchising. By 1917, they already have 175 stores. By 1920, 312. Growth is exponential. But the real takeoff, which will lead to the creation of the fatal real estate object, occurs in the mid-1920s. The Jazz Age, the era of easy money, the era when America went mad with consumption. Company stocks soar into the stratosphere. On October 23, 1924, J.C. Penney shares appear on the New York Stock Exchange for the first time. Overnight, James Cash Penney stops being just a rich merchant. He becomes a multi-millionaire. His fortune is estimated at tens of millions of dollars. And here, a psychological shift occurs. When a person has too much money, he begins to seek a way to immortalize his name. He begins to think that he is chosen. It is at this moment that Penney decides to create his monument. But unlike other titans like Rockefeller or Vanderbilt, he does not build just a palace for himself. His ambition is much grander and more dangerous. He wants to build a utopia. In 1926, he turns his gaze south to Florida. The state is experiencing a land boom. Penney buys 120,000 acres of land in Clay County. This is not just a plot. It is territory the size of a small European country. He calls this project Penney Farms. The concept is grandiose. It is supposed to be an ideal agricultural community. On one side, advanced farming technologies for young farmers. On the other, memorial community for retired priests and missionaries, people who, like his father, served God all their lives and remained poor in old age. Penney hires the best architects. He demands that houses for poor priests look like noble estates. Style, Norman Gothic. Tile roofs, pointed windows, manicured gardens. This is an architectural paradox. Housing for the needy that looks more luxurious than bankers' homes. He invests his own money in this project, million after million. He builds roads, runs electricity, erects a church. This is a fusion of his childhood trauma, poverty of the father preacher, and his current omnipotence. He tries to rewrite his father's history, saving hundreds of other fathers. But in this philanthropy lurks poison. To finance and expand this project, Penney takes a fatal step. He doesn't just spend cash. He starts playing banking games. He acquires a controlling stake in City National Bank in Miami to have financial leverage for regional development. He puts his name and reputation on the line. He signs personal guarantees for the bank's obligations. During this period, his life splits in two. In New York, he is a tough capitalist, chairman of the board, a man whose word moves markets. In Florida, he is a kind shepherd, a messiah in a white linen suit who walks among grateful old people and checks crop quality. He buys another estate, for personal use, in White Plains, New York, a huge mansion with stables where he breeds purebred bulls. One of his bulls costs as much as the average American earns in 10 years. This is the peak of his power. He is over 50 years old. He has a young third wife. The second died tragically, leaving another scar on his heart. He has heirs. He has an empire. It seems that he has achieved absolute balance between matter and spirit. He is rich, but spends money on good deeds. He is powerful, but fair. The system works flawlessly. However, while building this paradise on earth, Penney misses one detail. He forgets the rule that he himself created in Wyoming. No debts. Blinded by the scale of his good intentions, he allows himself to become vulnerable. Florida at the end of the 1920s is not just a resort. It is a financial bubble ready to burst. Hurricanes, land fraud, overheated market. Penney enters this storm, confident that his golden rule will protect him from the laws of economics. He uses his company shares, his most valuable asset, as collateral for loans to keep his charitable projects alive. He ties his fate to the fate of the land, and the land begins to shake. While jazz plays in New York, clouds begin to gather in Florida. Sams, his rational partner, warns him. He says that you cannot mix business and charity, cannot risk core capital for a utopia. But Penney does not listen. He hears only the voice of his mission. He feels like the architect of human destinies. He does not yet know that his majestic Penney Farms in Florida will become not a monument to his generosity, but a tombstone for his fortune. He does not notice how the foundation under his feet turns into quicksand. The stage is set. The scenery is in place. The golden calf is cast. There is very little time left until the moment when the music stops. 1928, Westchester County, New York, White Plains. If you want to understand the psychology of a man who will soon lose his mind, do not look at his bank accounts. Look at his house. James Cash Penney's estate in White Plains is not just residential real estate. It is an architectural projection of his ego, frozen in stone and oak. It is the physical embodiment of how the son of a poor preacher imagines success. When the car drives through the wrought iron gates, the first thing that catches the eye is the manic order. The gravel on the paths lies as if it had been hand-sorted. The lawns are mowed with millimeter precision. This is not nature. This is nature subordinated to the will of one man. The house rises at the end of the alley. It is a massive structure in the style of English and Norman Renaissance. Stone, heavy tiles, pointed arches. A style that screams of eternity, roots, traditions. Precisely what Penney never had. He bought history because he could not inherit it. Inside the house reigns an atmosphere not so much of comfort as of the solemn silence of a museum. It smells of beeswax, old leather, and money here. The furniture is brought from Europe. Massive oak tables, chairs with high backs, tapestries. Every item here weighs more than all of his father's possessions. But the most interesting place in this estate is neither the library nor the grand dining room. It is the barn. It sounds absurd, but it is here, among the hay and manure, that Penney's true obsession is revealed. In the 1920s, he spends a fortune creating the best herd of Guernsey cows in the world. He buys a bull named Langwater Foremost. The price of the deal is $20,000. In today's exchange rate, that's about $350,000 for one animal. This is not just farming. This is eugenics of horned cattle. Penney is obsessed with the idea of pure bloodlines, ideal genetics, and productivity. He looks at these cows the same way he looks at his store managers, as biological units that, with proper care and strict selection, should yield maximum results. Langwater Foremost is for him a living symbol of the golden rule. Better quality yields better results. He builds facilities for his cows that are cleaner than the hospitals in the Missouri of his childhood. In this estate, Penney receives guests. Bankers, politicians, partners come here. But these visits lack the hedonism of the Jazz Age. In Penney's house, prohibition is observed more strictly than in the Constitution. Not a drop of alcohol. No cigars, no gambling. Parties here resemble church gatherings, only in palace decorations. Guests sit on antique chairs, drink lemonade, and listen to the host's musings on morality and milk yields. This creates a surreal contrast. Beyond the estate walls, America is going mad. The Great Gatsby throws orgies on Long Island, just a couple dozen miles from here. On Wall Street, speculators make millions in an hour. And here, in White Plains, time seems frozen in the 19th century. Penney created a vacuum. He built a fortress of morality, thinking it would protect him from the chaos of the outside world. The psychology of the space here speaks of one thing: total control. Penney rises at dawn. He tours the grounds. He knows the name of every gardener and every stable hand. He personally checks the electricity bills for a house spanning thousands of square feet. This micromanagement habit, which made him rich in retail, turns into a neurosis on the scale of personal life. He doesn't know how to enjoy wealth. He only knows how to administer it. Every room in the house has its purpose, and that purpose is service. Study, for work. Dining room, for maintaining social connections. Bedroom, for restoring strength before work. There is no place for idleness here. Even the artworks on the walls, landscapes, portraits of ancestors, often not his own but bought along with the antiques, are meant to inspire awe and respect for labor. But there is another side to this greatness: loneliness. Despite having his third wife, Caroline, and children, Penney remains isolated in this huge house. He is a monument to himself. The people who come to him see not a person, but a function. Mr. Penney, the founder. Mr. Penney, the philanthropist. He is locked in a golden cage of his own image. It is from here, from this office with a view of the perfect lawns, that he manages his Florida Penney Farms project. Maps, irrigation plans, construction estimates lie on the table. He looks at them and sees how he is changing the landscape of America. He feels like he is playing chess with God himself, and so far, winning. The cost of maintaining this estate and the farms in Florida is colossal. Tens of thousands of dollars go monthly just to operating expenses.
But in 1928,
This seems like a trifle. Dividends from J.C. Penney Company shares flow like a river. The stock price reaches its peak, over $100 per share. Penney is confident that this stream is endless. The house in White Plains stands on a hill, towering over the surroundings. This is a position of strength. But any military strategist will tell you, a position on top of a hill is the most dangerous if you have no lines of retreat. Penney has none. All his assets, all his liquidity, all his obligations are tied in a tight knot. He looks at his prize bull for $20,000 and sees in it confirmation of his genius. He does not see that this bull is an asset. He does not see that this house is an asset. He does not see that his charity in Florida is a black hole disguised as paradise. The walls of the estate in White Plains are thick, but they are not soundproof. In October 1929, noise that cannot be drowned out by prayer will begin to seep through them. The ring of the telephone, telegraph tapes, shouts of newsboys. But for now it is quiet here. Too quiet. Penney walks through the long corridors and his footsteps echo. He feels like a patriarch, a biblical Job whom God has blessed for righteousness. He has forgotten what happened to Job afterward. He has forgotten that God sometimes takes everything to test faith. This house, this temple of success built on a foundation of stocks and morality, is ready for its most terrible test. The owner is confident that it stands on rock. In reality, he stands on the edge of an abyss, and below, the tectonic plates of the world economy are already beginning to shift. October 29, 1929, New York. This day entered history as Black Tuesday. But for James Cash Penney, it began as an ordinary working day. He was sitting in his office, reviewing sales reports on overalls and calico, but by noon, the world outside the window had changed forever. When the stock exchange crashed, Penney did not panic like the others. Unlike speculators, he believed in real values, in goods, in stores, in people. He thought the crisis would affect only paper millionaires. This was his fatal mistake. He did not account for how deeply his personal finances were intertwined with the banking system, which was now collapsing like a house of cards. Penney's tragedy lay not in the fall of his company's stocks. J.C. Penney stores, selling inexpensive goods, paradoxically held out and even retained customers. People continued to buy socks and shirts because they needed something to wear. The tragedy lay in his charity. Remember the project in Florida, Penney Farms and City National Bank? When the panic began, the bank's depositors in Florida rushed to withdraw their money. The bank was on the verge of bankruptcy. Any other businessman in Penney's place would have declared limited liability, let the bank collapse, and preserved his personal fortune. It would have been legal. It would have been rational. It would have been business. But James Cash Penney could not do that. For him, it was a matter of honor. He had given his name to this bank. He had promised people safety. And now, following his golden rule, he committed an act of financial suicide. He decided to cover the bank's losses out of his own pocket. He pledged his J.C. Penney Company shares. He took loans secured by his future to pay off the depositors in Florida. He threw all his resources into the furnace of the crisis, hoping to extinguish the fire with money. But the fire was too strong. The bank collapsed anyway, and with it, Penney's protection collapsed. By 1930, the situation became catastrophic. The shares he had used as collateral depreciated. Creditors demanded immediate repayment. Banks that had fawned over him just yesterday now sent bailiffs. At this moment, we see the deepest moral ambivalence of the hero. On one hand, he is a saint who sacrificed himself for the depositors. On the other hand, he is a madman who put his own wife and children's well-being at risk for the pride of being a savior. He wanted to be God for his wards, but turned out to be mortal. The scene shifts to the mansion in White Plains. The house, which was a symbol of triumph, turns into a tomb. Penney is forced to dismiss almost all the servants. The huge halls, which required daily cleaning, become covered in dust. The gardeners leave. The famous Guernsey cows are sold or left without proper care. Here, the second character enters the scene. His wife, Caroline Autenreith. She is younger than him. She has seen him only strong, only victorious. Now she sees a man who ages 10 years in 1 week. She sees him wandering the dark corridors of the mansion, turning off lights in empty rooms to save a few cents on electricity. This is not Scrooge's miserliness. This is the panic fear of a man who has lost control over reality. Their dinners pass in deathly silence. Penney cannot eat. He looks at his plate and sees debt figures there. $7 million. This number pounds in his temples. He has stopped being the man with 1,000 partners. Now he is a man with 1,000 creditors. He feels like a traitor. He betrayed his father's memory, who taught him not to have debts. He betrayed his family, which was accustomed to abundance. He betrayed his employees, many of whom also held savings in company shares, and now lost everything. The burden of responsibility he carried on his shoulders became unbearable. His moral compass, which always pointed north, now spins wildly. Was he right to act that way? Was it worth sacrificing himself? There is no answer. It is in this period, at the end of 1930, beginning of 1931, that his physical transformation begins. Psychosomatics is a cruel thing. Penney's body begins to react to unbearable stress. First, it is insomnia. He does not sleep night after night. Then, trembling in his hands appears. He cannot hold a pen to sign documents transferring property to the banks. But the worst happens inside his consciousness. He begins to believe that he is cursed. He, a convinced Christian, begins to think that God has turned away from him. He searches for the reason in himself. Where did I sin? He asks the void. He reviews his actions. Perhaps he was too proud? Perhaps he loved his money too much. He continues to go to work at the headquarters in New York, but now he is a ghost there. He is no longer the owner of the controlling stake. He is a hired chairman, a figurehead. His partners, including Earl Sams, treat him with pity mixed with irritation. They save the business by ruthlessly cutting expenses, closing inefficient outlets, laying off people. Penney watches this in horror. This is not his method. This is not the golden rule. But he has no say. He is bankrupt. At home, Caroline tries to reach him. She says they can live modestly, that money is not the main thing. But Penney does not hear her. For him, money was never just currency. It was the measure of his virtue. If there is no money, then there is no virtue. Then he is a bad person. By the fall of 1931, the tension reaches its peak. Penney begins having guilt hallucinations. It seems to him that passers-by on the street know about his shame. It seems to him that his deceased wives look at him reproachfully. He becomes paranoid. He fears that he will be imprisoned for debts, although debtor's prison has long been abolished. He isolates himself from friends. He stops attending church because he cannot look God in the eye. The great philanthropist who built the memorial community for priests now feels unworthy to enter the temple. This is a classic tragedy of ancient scale. The hero who rose to the top thanks to his principles is brought down by those same principles.
His kindness became his weakness. His faith became his torment. In December 1931, the body delivers the final blow. The chickenpox virus, dormant in his nerve nodes since childhood, awakens. Shingles erupts on his torso. The pain is so intense that he cannot wear a shirt. The doctors throw up their hands. Painkillers do not help. They understand that the cause is not in the virus, but in his head. The nervous system has burned out. The family makes a decision. He needs to be isolated. He needs to be saved. They choose the Battle Creek Sanatorium in Michigan. This is not just a hospital. It is the last refuge for broken titans. Caroline sees him off to the train. Tears are in her eyes, but in Penny's eyes, only emptiness. He is sure that he is going to die. He is sure that this is his last journey. The train carries him away from New York, away from the ruins of his greatness, away from the stores bearing his name. He leaves everything behind. There is no checkbook in his pocket. There is no hope in his soul. He has become Job on the ash heap. But unlike the biblical hero, he has not yet heard God's voice. He hears only the clatter of the wheels, counting the miles to his end. December 27, 1931. Morning. The corridors of the Battle Creek Sanatorium. James Cash Penney opens his eyes. He is alive. This fact causes him not relief, but disappointment. He was sure that his heart would stop in his sleep, but the biological mechanism continues to function despite the owner's will. Outside the window, a gray dawn. The pain from shingles is still there, but now something new mixes with it. A strange sound. Dully, through the heavy doors of the ward, music can be heard. Penny gets up. This movement is difficult for him. Every joint bend responds with fire in the nerve endings. He puts on a robe. He goes out into the corridor. This is no longer the gait of an industry titan. These are the shuffling steps of an old man. At this moment, he is nobody. He has no checkbook. He has no signing authority. He has no future. He is simply patient number 219. He follows the sound. The music comes from the dining room, which serves as a chapel in the mornings. He stops at the entrance. Inside sit doctors, nurses, and several patients. Someone plays the piano. A woman's voice begins to sing. This is not a complex oratorio. This is a simple Protestant hymn written by Kavilla Martin in 1904. The hymn's title? God Will Take Care of You. Penny sits down on a chair in the back row. He listens to the words. Be not dismayed, whate'er betide. God will take care of you. At this moment, an event occurs that biographers later call a miracle, and psychologists cognitive restructuring or catharsis. For Penny, it was a moment of complete surrender. For the last 2 years, he had been fighting. He fought banks, the market, debts, his conscience. He tried to maintain control over a world that was falling apart. He thought the outcome depended only on him, that he was Atlas holding up the sky. And that sky crushed him. Sitting on the hard chair in the sanatorium, he suddenly understands the fundamental error in his thinking. He is not God.
He is not obligated to save everyone. And most importantly, his value as a person is not equal to the balance in his bank account. He closes his eyes and says one phrase, "Lord, I can do nothing more. I give it to you." This is a moment of transcendence. In that second, when he acknowledges his complete defeat, when he lets go of control, the burden disappears. He later described it as a physical sensation, as if I was instantly lifted from the darkness of a dungeon into warm, bright sunlight. This is not a metaphor. Medical records confirm over the next few hours his physical condition improved sharply. The psychosomatic clamp that caused the disease exacerbation was released. He does not become healthy instantly, but he stops dying.
He returns to the ward and does what he has not done for months. He sleeps peacefully. When he wakes up, he is still bankrupt. His debt of $7 million has not gone anywhere. The Great Depression is still raging outside the window, but the attitude to the facts has changed. Fear is gone. Clarity has come in its place. Penney is discharged from the sanatorium not as a victor, but as a survivor. He returns to New York, and here begins the most amazing part of his transformation. Instead of hiding from shame, he goes to Earl Sams, his former subordinate who now effectively runs the company. Penney says, "I am ready to work. Not to manage, not to command, to work." He accepts the new reality. He is no longer the owner of the empire. He is a hired employee. The board of directors assigns him a salary. According to various accounts, it amounted to about $3,000 a month. For an ordinary person, huge money. For a man who owned 40 million, this is pennies. But Penney accepts it with gratitude. He begins traveling to stores, but now he enters them not as the king of retail, inspecting the displays. He enters as a man who knows what loss is. He talks to salespeople. He talks to customers who count every cent to buy socks for their children. And a paradox happens. His downfall brings him closer to people. In an era when hatred of the rich reaches its peak, when bankers are ready to be lynched, James Cash Penney becomes a folk hero. People know he lost everything just like them. He suffered trying to save others. This sincerity becomes the company's new capital. The J.C. Penney brand transforms. It is no longer just a store of cheap goods. It is a store that understands the nation's pain. In 1932, at the height of the crisis, Penney performs an act that finally seals his transformation. He begins repaying his personal debts. He does not declare personal bankruptcy to write them off, although lawyers beg him to do it. He says, "My name is worth more than my money." He works like the devil. He writes motivational letters to employees. He gives lectures. He uses his experience of falling as a teaching tool. He tells people, "I was at the bottom. I looked into the abyss, and I came back. You can too." His relationship with money changes radically. Before, he gave away money to feel righteous. That was pride. Now he gives himself because he understood that ownership is an illusion. We take nothing with us. The house in White Plains, the symbol of his ego, will eventually be transferred to a charitable organization. His beloved cows will be sold. Penney Farms in Florida will pass under the management of an independent foundation and continue to operate, but without his total control. By the mid-30s, the company begins to emerge from the dive. But Penney no longer strives to restore his 40 million. He has found something greater, a purpose. His purpose now is service. Sams, observing this, admits, "The company survived thanks to tough management, but the company's spirit survived thanks to Penney's resurrection." If the founder had taken his own life that night in Battle Creek, the brand most likely would not have survived the moral blow. James Cash Penney will live another 40 years after that night. He will see World War II, see the post-war boom, see man fly into space. He will restore his fortune, but never again treat it as his property. Until the end of his days, he will sign simply, partner. But before we close this chapter, we need to look at what remains for us today, at the legacy that has outlived the man, the stores, and the era itself. Penney's story is not a business textbook. It is a warning. February 12, 1971, New York, hospital. The man lying in the ward has lived 95 years. His heart, which was ready to stop from fear in 1931, worked for another 4 decades. James Cash Penney dies.
But this is not the death of a bankrupt in solitude.
This is the passing of a patriarch. By the time of his death, the J.C. Penney Company is the second largest retailer in the United States of America after Sears. Sales amount to more than $4 billion a year. That's $50 billion in today's money. But the most important thing in this final scene is not the numbers. The most important is what is not here. There is no fear here. The story of James Cash Penney is the antithesis of the Great Gatsby's story. F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote his novel about a man who tried to buy the past and build a castle to hide his origins. Gatsby died because he could not let go of his illusion. Penney survived because he killed his own illusion with his own hands. The estate in White Plains, that very palace which was a symbol of his isolation, did not become his mausoleum. Penney gave it away. He understood that a house of such scale is an anchor that drags to the bottom. Today, in place of many similar estates, stand elite condominiums or office centers. But Penney's legacy is not bricks. The Penney Farms settlement in Florida, because of which he nearly ruined himself, exists to this day. It is called Penney Retirement Community. Hundreds of retirees still live there. His mistake became his most enduring monument. The irony of fate, what financiers called a catastrophic investment in 1929, turned out to be the only asset that survived all the crises of the 20th century, because it was based on care, not profit. What does this story teach us today? We live in an era of a new Great Depression, a depression of meanings. We see techies from Silicon Valley who, like Penney in the 1920s, try to optimize their lives to the state of bio-robots. We see the cult of productivity, where sleep is considered a weakness, and the absence of $1 billion by 30 years is a failure. We see people building personal brands that are as fragile facades as the mansion in White Plains. James Cash Penney is the first modern example of burnout and rebirth. He showed that successful success is a pathology. His breakdown in the Battle Creek Sanatorium was not weakness. It was the body's protective reaction to the lie he lived. He proved that you can lose $40 million and become richer. After his recovery, he earned new millions, but he no longer hoarded them. He created the J.C. Penney Foundation. He gave away money as quickly as it came. By the end of his life, his personal fortune was modest by billionaire standards, but his influence was colossal. He went to work until the very end. A few weeks before his death, at 95 years old, he still visited the office in New York. He communicated with employees who were 70 years younger than him. They saw in him not a fossil, but a living legend. A man who defeated the main enemy of any entrepreneur, his own ego. In the modern business world, it is customary to talk about an exit strategy, how to sell the company and leave with money. Penney had no exit strategy. He had an entry strategy. Entry into real life through letting go of control. When the coffin with James Cash Penney's body was carried out of the church, thousands of people followed it. These were not only business partners. These were children of those whom he clothed in cheap clothes during the Depression. These were priests living out their lives in his houses in Florida. The final lesson of this story is simple and cruel. We own nothing. Neither our houses, nor our accounts, nor our bodies. All this is temporary assets given to us in management. A crisis is not the end of the world. A crisis is an audit. It checks what will remain of you if all external attributes are taken away. James Cash Penney was stripped of everything. And under the ruins of the empire, he found a human being. If you pass by a J.C. Penney store with its sign in any American shopping mall today, do not look at the mannequins. Remember that night in the Battle Creek Sanatorium? Remember the man who sat in the darkness, trembling from pain and shame, convinced that his life was over. He was wrong. His life was just beginning. True wealth is the ability to sleep peacefully, knowing that even if the world collapses tomorrow, you will remain yourself. The golden rule worked, but not as he expected. It did not return money to him. It returned his soul to him.